Sometimes you need a break from the tension, from the stress, from the anxiety, from the tax paying, from the stakes. Sometimes you need a little animal character to accidentally ingest something that's like euphemistically alcoholic and start hiccuping little bubbles. Sometimes you need someone to step in and act a fool. Sometimes you need a comic relief. But how do you make one that's a good one? So a comic relief is typically a break in the tension in an otherwise serious or dramatic story. And this could be in the form of a scene, but in a lot of stories, especially those that are intended for children or a wide audience, the comic relief will be embodied by a character. So if things are starting to get maybe a little too scary, maybe the kids are getting bored, this character can come in with a brief respite of being funny in order to add some entertainment. Sometimes a character in an otherwise comedic or funny film or story will still be designated as the comic relief, and that's usually because every appearance of this character results in some kind of punchline, or kind of their entire purpose in the story is as a joke, or perhaps they're just more zany or funnier than the other characters. Designing a good comic relief character has a lot to do with tone and humor, which itself is based off of the story that your character is inhabiting. Humor is such a subjective thing that is constantly shifting from year to year, from generation to generation. It can vary across country, region, language, and culture, and that's because humor is really a reflection of or a reaction to the environment that it's in. And that's really something that's important to keep in mind as we look at our comic relief characters, is their context. So let's look at some good and bad examples of these kinds of characters. Now, Disney's got quite a few examples of comic relief characters in their films. My first two examples, though, a good one and a bad one, are from their pre-Disney ownership. So in Star Wars, it's a pretty obvious one, C-3PO and R2-D2, compared with Jar Jar Binks. Pretty obvious, pretty famous examples, and even C-3PO gets a lot of flack for some of his annoying qualities and nervousness, but I think that the difference between these two examples has everything to do with tone. So R2-D2 and C-3PO are actually based off of these two fool characters from the Japanese film Seven Samurai, and their constant bickering back and forth is like a nice added dose of humor, while they are still simultaneously forwarding the plot of the film in the original Star Wars movie. Even once 3PO is separated from R2 in The Empire Strikes Back, he adds this really good nervous element to the crew that's aboard the Falcon, and he gels really well with them. And at that point, all of the characters are joking, they're sarcastic and witty, and there's a sense of fun with all of them. It's not all just resting on one comic relief character. And I think this highlights the most important element of good comic relief, which is this character needs to blend in with the story and the rest of the characters, otherwise it's just not going to work. Even from a visual standpoint, with the original Star Wars movies, the main cast, their wardrobe is predominantly these muted colors of black, white, and brown. And so when you add these two droids, even though they're, science fantasy, a gold droid and a white and blue one who appear realistic, they aren't so much of a departure visually that it's distracting. Looking at Jar Jar, on the other hand, there's this huge disparity where everything that he does, every scene he's in, every joke is this over-the-top silliness. And meanwhile, he's mixed in with a cast that's humorless and lifeless, that's on this quest of utmost seriousness. So in essence, Jar Jar is meant to be the funny one, and they're constantly giving him these clumsy little vignettes where he's supposed to showcase his humor that are cut away from the story and cut away from the rest of the characters. Also visually, he's this early CGI, fully CGI creature intercut with a bunch of live-action humans. And the results are pretty jarring. In fact, I would go so far as... Okay, please hear me out all the way on this, all the way through. I'd like to predict that Jar Jar would have been better received by audiences if the very first time he was ever seen, the first time that people saw him, was in The Force Awakens. Now, this is because It's not just because the practical effects were better, the CGI had gotten to a better place, but because the characters in that movie all have this good sense of humor and a good chemistry between them. That's actually a strong point of the movie. And I'm not saying that this would be a good idea. I'm just saying that's how much the environment the character is in plays into how well the comic relief works. A couple more good examples to learn from. Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. Really funny, a lot of people love, might argue would be the best part of the movie. And if you want to zoom in on why he works so well, it's that he hinges completely on this irreverent and wacky tone that the whole movie has. The other characters are given funny moments and a sense of humor and well-rounded personalities. And what that does is gives Kronk this permission to be a little bit more out there. I was about to say, if you were old enough to remember the trailers for Wreck-It Ralph, like, I think my sense of timing is a little whacked out. Like, I know that some of you guys are a little bit on the younger side, so it's possible, but the movie's only like 5 years old. Anyway, so upon seeing the first trailers for Wreck-It Ralph, I was pretty worried. And I feel like I've talked about this in another video before, but Vanellope gives the appearance of being this obnoxious, smart-talking comic relief character with no redeeming qualities. In actuality, though, the movie kind of hinges on her and makes you care about her in a way that's equal to, if not better than, most Disney characters in general. This has everything to do with rounding out a character as a whole. Instead of just giving them jokes and gaffes and clumsy falls, you want to give them desires and motivations and flaws and challenges. You really end up feeling for Vanellope, which turns some of that obnoxious humor into endearing humor. I think that's really important. At a certain point, it might be good for you to examine whether or not your story actually needs a comic relief character. Perhaps it might be better if the characters in your story could equally share the load of humor between them. There's some inherent humor when your comic relief has some flaws or imperfections. Physically, a skinny or lanky or physically awkward or even overweight character can have some humorous situations that you put them in. I think it's good if you don't point and laugh at them because of their physical state. I think that's something to keep in mind. A legitimate flaw like a neurosis, a nervousness, a selfish scheming that's constantly futile, an unconditional puppy dog-like love that gets them in over their heads. I think there's a lot that you can do with flaws without overdoing the comic relief. Kids will most likely laugh at anything, and that's because things are new to them and surprising to them, but audiences in general, I think, have seen so many versions and variations of the comic relief character that they start to get a little wary when they see a character that you're projecting as the funny one. So it's important, if you're going to do this and include a comic relief, don't take shortcuts and start pandering with the humor. If you're going to use a comic relief, do it right. And another thing that we talked about is not stopping the flow of the story in order to put a spotlight on the comic relief character. Allow them to effect and be affected by their environment, the characters around them, and the story. That's it for me today. I'm making new videos every week at Character Design Forge. Subscribing on YouTube lets you know when new videos are made available. My course, Learn Character Design, is a comprehensive character design education. Head over to learncharacterdesign.com to find out more about that. If this or any of my videos have ever been educational or entertaining for you, please consider backing me on patreon.com/bageldenizen. You'll get access to exclusive videos just like these, just for Patreon supporters. Thank you for watching, and have fun creating.